thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. Nice to see some familiar faces and, braving the rain. Like Denise said, we have 3 very talented architects here, and we're talking about brick.
I'm Brittany Macomber. I'm a senior project manager at MA. We really strive to design contextual and thoughtful buildings and public works, but that are also contemporary and innovative. Some of the more recent projects that I've completed working at MA has been the Grand Mulberry, which is another project that's up in this showroom, but also 45 East 7th Street. I was the project manager of this project. The client for this project was Nexus Development Group. It's a New York City developer that we've collaborated with on 3 projects, which I think led to success. We had a great relationship with them. The site of this project is located in the Lower East Side Historical District. It's a project that falls under the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission purview. It has about 100 feet of frontage on 7th Street and 50 feet on 2nd Avenue. It's a 7-story building with its mixed use with retail in the cellar and the first floor and residential condos on floors 2 through 7. It's about 36,000 square feet. And for the design inspiration, we really pulled from the historical neighborhood. And a lot of these tenement buildings have a tripartite facade, which has a base, middle, and top. And so when we were studying design for this project, and goal for me is to just make these projects contextual anyway, but we had an extra layer with having to have it be a historical reviewed building. And so we've really focused on these tenement buildings in the neighborhood, which have a lot of intricate details, but in smaller areas. So like at the base or in a medallion or at the top. And so we thought these details were so beautiful that we really wanted to celebrate them and apply them to large spans on the facade. And so in a similar way of the tripartite facade. And so at the base, we have a single corbel brick detail which is achieved with a modular brick shape. And it's basically the brick that creates like a banding effect that goes in and out. And then at the top of the building, at the 6th floor, we have a double corbel, which goes in and out twice. So it almost has like this wave effect. And then in the middle, we have what I call like a checkerboard pattern, which we pulled from a traditional pattern found in these historical buildings where they would cut bricks and rotate them, which can be really labor intensive. And so since we were applying it to such a large span of the facade, we really wanted to simplify labor to break down cost and also to make sure we could have a consistent field. So we reached out to Glen-Gery very early on in the design process because we usually meet with LPC for review soon after like SD. So you really need to do your research and make sure that you can show details that can actually be built. So when you're presenting these 3D presentations, that you can actually prove that you can actually build it because they go out and inspect the buildings at when they're completed. So we reached out to Glen-Gery, particularly for this checkerboard pattern we wanted to achieve. And we worked with them and we designed an extruded L-shaped brick that was based on the Econo brick, which is a 3 5/8 by 3 5/8 brick that gives you this square look. So that was a nice detail that it was like an even dimension. And we even incorporated a mortar reveal so that when you mortar the bricks in, it looks like they're individual pieces and that the mortar is consistent even though it's just one piece. So, this was really successful. It saved time, it made things more consistent, and so once we design these shapes, it was really important to work out the coursing and document the building well so that we could relay this to the field. And so we lovingly, our project architect who's here, Graham Sowerby, lovingly coursed the whole building, the whole facade It was really important that these bricks landed on properly, started and stopped at the openings for the windows and the storefront. We didn't want to cut bricks. We thought that would take away from the effect. So we did that and drew really great details and even some 3D details, line drawings to make sure that to the field they could really understand like the depths and the details when they came together, which made a really successful process in the field with the GC and the masons as well.
Amazing. Well, it looks beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah. And then we'll keep talking about this. If anyone has any questions, just hold them. But thank you so much. Would you just for us like one more time like say the names of the 3 different styles that you used here?
So I think that we're only really showing the top.
2 of them, right? Yeah.
So at the base is a single pourable, which is similar to this top one. It's really just the brick goes in and out like 3/4 of an inch. And so then at the top, we just add a little, a little more interest and depth. We added an extra step so that it almost looks like a wave there. And then here are the custom bricks, where this is actually 1 brick, but it looks like 2 squares. And they were just laid up in a running bond, so they give you that checkerboard look. And that was the custom shape that we worked with Glen-Gery on.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So again, I'm Amanda Morgan, and I work at nArchitects. nArchitects is a small design firm located in Brooklyn. And really, our projects kind of run the gamut. We're not really specialists in anything, I would say, but we do a lot of public projects, large public spaces, multifamily housing, single-family housing, et cetera. And the project that I'm going to talk about today is the New York State Equal Rights Heritage Center, which is located in Auburn, New York. We completed this project in 2018 after a very, very rapid schedule. It was 18 months from design kickoff to the ribbon cutting. And our client was the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation and the City of Auburn. So the purpose of this building is really to be a welcome center of sorts. It's to welcome visitors from everywhere, introduce them to the sites and attractions, both locally in Auburn and across the state, that are related to the struggle, various struggles for equal rights. And the purpose is really to draw people in and then send them out. As you can kind of tell from this photograph, the project is located in a really prominent location in the city. It's on the border between a historic district and downtown Auburn, and it's actually situated within the historic district, the South Street Historic District. And the South Street Historic District, interestingly enough, sort of ends at our project and begins at Harriet Tubman's house, about a mile down South Street. So there were a lot of project stakeholders involved. Obviously, being within a historic district, we similarly had to go through SHPO review. So relating to the historic context was very important. And also the community, they really loved the parking lot that was in this location, and they were really concerned about what was going to take this prominent space in their city. So just to talk a little bit about the context that's around the building, it's surrounded by, actually, City Hall is where the photo is taken from, and then the historic buildings, the YMCA, the Westminster Church in the background. And then what you're not seeing just to the south of the building is actually the neighboring Seward House Museum, which was William Seward and Frances Seward's home. And they're 2 very key figures in the fight for equal rights in New York State. So it was really this great opportunity to really think of that as content for the exhibition inside. So knowing that we had all of these stakeholders to build consensus with, and also knowing that we had to go through a SHPO review process, we started out by really doing a thorough look at the South Street Historic District, looking at the scale, the proportion, and the materials that are used locally there. And one of the first things that we decided was necessary to do was to take this 7,500 square foot building and break down the mass into smaller volumes. It just didn't feel right to have one large single-story building on the site. And so we created 4 volumes which shift and plan to relate to the context, and they also open up into these triangular courtyards that frame views back to this very important historic context. In the interior, we wanted something that would feel warm and inviting, and we were also very aware that the schedule was crazy, and So we chose to use board-formed cast-in-place concrete for the interior walls and a mass timber roof. And what this did was it acted as primary structure, but it also meant that it was the finished material. No one was coming in day two, to add additional finish. For the exterior, we very quickly landed on brick because of the context. There are several historic houses, beautiful historic houses along South Street, as well as some of the civic buildings that are located around the site. So we landed on that fairly quickly. And in looking very carefully at the colors of the brick of these existing homes, we settled on this winter rose color, which we thought related very well, was similar but still different. And we really wanted to use brick uniformly and everywhere. We actually have, the only special shape is a bullnose. Otherwise, it's just a standard brick. And that made it very easy for the mason to follow some details and meet the project schedule. A couple of the details that we incorporated to make brick feel more contemporary. We have, you can see in this photo right here, we did a very subtle angling of the brick on two of the largest facades. Because it was exhibition inside, it was really necessary to have some opaque walls. So we did an angled brick to sort of bring some texture into those opaque areas, and also to sort of play with light and shadow, changing with the seasons, changing throughout the day. We also noticed on a lot of the historic homes and buildings that there were shutters on every single opening. So we sort of riffed on that. And with our large contemporary steel storefronts, we did a brick shutter that steps in, just two simple courses to frame those new openings. And then we also looked at the necessary technical details like an expansion joint. And like I said before, we used the bullnose. We sort of accentuated those on the facade instead of trying to hide them. And then we placed them in sort of a rhythm that worked well to break down the massing. And yeah, I guess just one final tidbit, since this is about brick. We learned in all of our research that Harriet Tubman had actually fired brick, made brick on their property. Their home was, her husband is a bricklayer, and their home was made out of the brick that was fired on their own property, as well as many of the homes within Auburn. And so we felt like the use of brick really grounded the building in both the historic and the material context.
Amazing, thank you so much. And before we move on, could you just say what is, for anyone who wouldn't know, what standard brick is? What do you mean when you say that?
Standard is just the standard shaped brick. It's probably what most of the buildings that we walk past every day are made out of. I believe it's 3 5/8 by 2 1/4 by 7 5/8. So it's roughly the 4 by 8 that you see stacked in a standard horsing.
Thank you so much.
That was great. Yeah. Again, I'm Alyse, and I'll introduce to you the project. I keep wanting to call it Ripley 2, but Solar 8200 Dixon Avenue. This project is in Silver Spring, Maryland. For those of you who, well, before I dive into that, this project was a collaboration with our client, Washington Property Company. It's a mixed-use, multifamily project in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is a satellite city to Washington, D.C. It's actually one of the last stops on the Red Line Metro, if you've ever taken the D.C. Metro. The Metro line actually is the western bounding edge to this site. This is, for as tall as this is, it's actually a fairly small site. There's also the Metropolitan Branch Trail, which is a hiker-biker path that runs also along that west side and runs parallel to the Metro. So with that bounding edge on the west, we're looking at the east side on Dixon Avenue here. And this project was really one of many in this district that transformed this area. I mean, this area was just, 1 to 2 story buildings, some vacant, some kind of industrial use, not a lot of character, didn't feel safe to walk through. And our client was very instrumental in transforming this neighborhood and really creating a street network and a grid that tied into the surrounding Silver Spring neighborhood. Trees, lighting, just something to make it feel like a neighborhood and make it feel like home. And we were thrilled to be part of it. This was the second project we did with them in this neighborhood. So it is brick all the way up to the 27th story. And we didn't even really waver on that. We never considered it not to be brick. When I think back on it, it's just such a timeless material, and I think it does have a place in contemporary architecture. And The top 20 stories are the 403 residential units, and the bottom story is mostly retail, which is going to be a food hall that's actually under construction right now. Clark Construction, the base building, and they're doing the fit out. And the middle floors, you see levels 2 through 5, are actually an above grade parking garage. So due to site constraints, we did not put the parking garage below grade, which is definitely preferred. That's what Montgomery County Planning wanted us to do. It wasn't working out. So we worked very closely with them and with our client to try to make the facade as residential as possible. So you'll see the windows on those levels mimic the windows above, but they're not an exact copy. We didn't want to just take the whole facade all the way down to level 1. So these windows are playing with some more porous materials to allow for the naturally ventilated garage to function, bringing in that pop of color, that kind of orange rust color to weave throughout. And then you can see the gasket that differentiates the on-go light brick blend from the deeper, richer, earthier clay coat blend at the bottom. The 6th floor has an amenity space that opens out onto a courtyard. And of course, there's rooftop terrace with great views of DC and the whole metropolitan area. So really cool project to work on, and interesting that it's brick, perhaps. So I'll leave it at that.
It is interesting. That's why we're here, right? So yeah, and thank you so much, y'all. Like, I mean, obviously, like very different projects in very different circumstances, but you're working with similar constraints and choices. So I guess the first thing would be, you know, and maybe Alyse, since you just spoke, you could speak to this, like in the design process. If you're going to use brick, like we've talked about context, like historical, like at what point do you decide on that? Is it like from the client, like, you know, because we've talked before about how the brick these days is not load bearing, right? Like it's mostly a facade thing. It's like aesthetic. There's also, we'll talk about the other benefits of it, you know, or just like the use values of it. But at what point in the process for this project specifically where you decided on this, right? Like where did that come from?
To get specific to phase, maybe not quite in concept, but the seed of an idea might have been there. But I think we really started picking probably in schematic designs pretty early on. And I think our client was also on board with masonry just for its durability and for the timelessness. So it's pretty early, yeah.
Okay, and then like obviously the historical like surroundings of yours, so it was probably from pretty early on, like something that was gonna.
Oh yeah, I think maybe one of the first site visits, we walked along South Street and we picked up a few pieces of brick that may have fallen off of the historic building, and we brought it back, and we actually came into numerous brick showrooms to just shop. We were almost window shopping for brick, and that's when we came upon the Winter Rose, which we liked that it was
Winter Rose, right?
Winter Rose.
Sounds so nice,
Yeah.
Mine's W1751.
But there was this really nice effect with that brick in particular. It was sort of a pink color, but it had almost like white flecks on the outside that we knew would come off pretty early after construction completion. So yeah, we were really interested in the idea of using that in particular because it was going to change over time.
Amazing. So like literally on the street, you just kind of like stubbed your toe on some brick and just like eureka, you know, walking out.
We may have been trespassing.
But obviously, that's great. I mean, I like also all three of you, just like when you speak about the brick, it's obviously such a textured thing, right? Like you all sound so passionate also about the color and the texture of it, you know, it's like, it's nice here. Do you want to share what process and the phase that you decided on it for that building? Like obviously y'all work a lot with it, and Lower East Side is such a kind of historic neighborhood. Like, you know, it's very iconic New York, you know, and you want it to fit in, right?
Yeah. 100%. We probably had a longer concept design phase on this project because we were presenting to LPC, and we usually do that during the concept phase because we need their approval to keep moving forward. So like you said, the Lower East Side has so much brick. I think it was undeniably going to be brick. Contentious sticking point, like going back and forth with the community board and the LPC, was actually the color. We originally picked more of like a gray, like a blue gray, and they thought it was a little dreary. So we ended up lightening it up, so it's more this grayish, I'd call it, you know, like a beige grayish. Yeah, and
is it through body, that color?
What's that?
Is it through body?
It's a through body color, yeah. So I think it's Dolomite gray might be the
And when you say full body, that means the whole
the clay, the color goes all the way through. Where I think with Alyse's, some of her were like applied,
coatings.
The coatings are applied, or you can have the full body that comes through. So if it was never like nicked or anything, like chipped, somebody hit it with a hammer, it would still be the same color, you know.
Through and through.
through and through.
Amazing.
So
I do have to ask though, like I do see gray brick in the city. Like,
yes.
what are the benefits? Like, I mean, it's kind of like it is like toned down and it has a good thing, but it is kind of dreary sometimes. Like, why are people using gray brick a bit more? I'm like personally curious because you see it. Like you said you were going to go with that originally, right? Like, is it like a formal thing?
I feel like it's like a running joke. Like architects love gray, different shades of gray. I don't know, but it's always. I feel like on these brick projects, if we are going with gray, it's just like I don't know. It's I mean they're very different. Like the other project I worked on the Great Mulberry that was like a bright orange red, and that was because that was in Little Italy, and it just so. I think it just pulls, and I'm sure different architects have different reasons for their projects, but it's interesting with the gray, which people may not know, is that it's really the color of the brick, if it's a through body, is based on the clay. And so, in the US, we have a lot of red clay. So it can be hard to find like a cool gray. And so a lot of times those colors are coming from, they come from Europe sometimes, because they have like a different clay colors. And so it's like we're trying to find the perfect gray. I feel
That's
like
good. I'm not going to
sometimes
press more because it's true that architects like gray. Like, I don't want y'all to get mad at me. So, no, it's nice. I mean, I think that the color came out really well on that. And the fact that it's like through is like obviously, I mean, when you guys are thinking about this, like, is the chipping and kind of like fracturing of it a bit, like eventually something you're like accounting for, right? Because like brick is it's so aggregate, right? Like, and it's all like a nice thing, kind of, even if it chips a bit, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. So, like, are y'all taking that into account, like, kind of when you're picking the aggregate, like picking the?
I think so. I mean, on other projects, we've like thought about doing like a coating or something, and it's something that crosses your mind, especially if you want like a consistent feel. If the monochrome color is something that you're going for.
Of course. So like but if there is a coating, like if it does kind of chip away a bit, then it's like a different color underneath.
Well, they do try to match the body as closely as possible. And so yes, that is a risk, I guess, with using a coating, but on the gray theme, I mean, yes, I think architects do tend to like, and at least in our case, we wanted a neutral, and I think the red of your Auburn project looks like perfect with that scale. I cannot imagine doing red all the way up 27 stories. You know what I mean? Like, I think it does have to do with scale. So we love that the coating gave us this sort of endless palette of grays. And the back color is, mimics it a bit. It's not exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of the coatings now, in particular, they actually strengthen the face of the brick. So if you're concerned about durability or chipping, then that's something that, we'll take into consideration. I mean, for us, we're always thinking about how close someone's going to get to the facade, thinking about design details that people might see up close versus far away. Yeah, but then also from just a maintenance, so many of our projects are public projects for city or state agencies. They just don't have the budget to maintain these projects long term. So we do spend a lot of time thinking about landscaping around to get like the right distance, not having concrete against brick where you're going to be, salting and maintaining it daily and chipping away at that material. So like on Auburn, we used a stone base to raise the brick up for that reason. Amazing. So I think that, there are definitely reasons to do through color. There are definitely reasons to do the coating for just maintenance and durability reasons.
Honestly, I've been around brick my whole life, and I'm learning so much from y'all. Like, there's so much to it. It's amazing. Well, at least while you're talking, like, obviously you have the kind of the tallest of the projects.
Right.
Does that, and we haven't used brick, I think, for a bit to do these tall buildings. It's kind of coming back. Obviously, people have been doing it, right? But like, when you're building a taller, mixed use, like these taller buildings, like, does brick like make things like complicated in a way that is annoying, or like kind of you have to like that wouldn't be otherwise, right?
Right. I mean, once you get above, I think we were discussing it before. I think it's maybe 45 feet, 50 feet, depending on various conditions, what kind of brick you're using, the quality of brick. You're going to be limited when you're stacking brick on itself without a relieving angle before you get to that shelf angle. So we already knew we were going with that shelf angle. I've even heard some structural engineers will let you do every other floor. Lately, I've been seeing every single floor there's an angle. So it really is hung. It really is floating. And so at that point, once you kind of hit that threshold, there wasn't really a limitation. I mean, the swing stage is a whole kind of this crazy apparatus that the mason constructs, and it hangs from the roof, and it goes up or down depending on what they're working on. So But that would probably have to be constructed for metal wall panel or any other material. It does add weight, so it may increase the size of your foundations if you want to consider that into cost. But in our case, cost was a factor, and masonry came in at a pretty reasonable rate. So the increased foundation didn't really sway that.
I guess we should talk about that right now too. Like, is brick always like, what is it like in the cost kind of breakdown for building? Is it, you guys said before, it depends on the quality, like depends on it, but like,
If it was all the glass brick on the stairway that we came up to get here, then it's very expensive.
Honestly, bring glass brick back is my opinion. Yeah.
I would say it's low mid. What do you
Low
guys think?
Yeah, I think so. And then it depends. I mean, as soon as you start doing custom shapes, you know, custom
Obviously,
extrusions,
three
that
of you
all
have
adds
this,
up.
like very custom design work on it too,
Well,
right?
I mean, for us, we used a standard brick, and it was all the same. So it was actually very, very cost effective to go that route. And then it was all in the detailing, right?
Which is really important. I think we should talk about this too, is that like, obviously when you're doing brick, you're working with the mason. Like, you know, you're working with the mason in a certain way. And I'm curious to like, as an architect, like how on the ground are you with them? Like, what is that relationship like, right? Because it is kind of like a very historic, like almost romantic kind of figure, right? Of people who are laying brick like this, right? So when you're especially doing kind of more intricate designs or something, like, could you just kind of like walk us through, whoever wants to start, and like what that process is like working with these artisans or, you know, bricklayers?
Brittany?
Okay.
You looked excited about it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, you know, like we said, we started early on working with Glen-Gery and the manufacturer to design the brick. And we even worked with them to make sure in our facade design, make sure the details would work. The interesting thing is that you really don't get involved with the masons and the GC till after construction, unless your client is bringing them on early on for pricing or something. So I think it really depends. In our case, we didn't meet up with them until construction, but the GC and the masonry sub, like Arc Builders, they were great. They were really good. They communicated a lot with us. Like I said, I think to us, it's really important to have good documentation, because you don't want to be there like every day, you know, like, so that was important.
And good plans too, right? So
exactly, right. So, but it was great because we would meet with them on site, and if there were any like unique conditions that maybe, you know, you can't always capture every detail of the building in a set, so they would talk to us about it before starting, and so it was really collaborative once they were brought on. But like, unfortunately, they're not brought on super early. But 45 East 7th Street was a project we did before the Grand Mulberry, and it actually ended up being the same GC, the same masonry sub on that project. And I do think the lessons we learned from 45 East 7th Street about the documentation, the detailing, and knowing what we learned from that project, like, really helped make that facade and that project really successful, like knowing limitations and how we needed to convey everything to them. So
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, similar to Brittany, we would really love to be working with the mason from day one. I think maybe the detailing would be better.
About it. You know, I mean, honestly, I'm like struck by like how also you think about brick, but like all of the buildings like have such, like, not perfection, but like they're so clean, right? Like even with the masonry blocks, right? So I'm just like a bit impressed and kind of like romantic about it, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there is like this incredible opportunity if you can work with a mason early on to work through the detailing together. Because with, you know, our project in Auburn and actually most of our masonry projects are public projects, so you preclude that mason from bidding on the project if you speak with them early. And so we actually depend a lot on Glen-Gery and, you know, and the brick supplier to answer all of our questions about whether or not a detail is going to work. On the Equal Rights Heritage Center in particular, we had shown the angled brick on our drawings, but the angle was not actually what was built. And it's because when we got on site and we were working with the mason, looking at exactly how much could we rotate each of those bricks without exposing the core, the interior cores of the brick. That was really how the 10 degrees came to be, the sort of final rotation. And, you know, that was all through testing on site to see what was the limitation of what we could actually do and how much of an effect could we get from that.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess that everyone does know we unfortunately can't work direct. We're not contracted directly to the subcontractor or even the contractor. So we are contracted to the client who has the contractor, at least in our case. But our contractor was great, our general contractor. We mock-ups, I cannot stress that enough. Our mock-ups had mock-ups. We definitely want to see it and have a small run of that brick before you scale it up. So that went back all the way to probably design development. We put those sorts of things in our specifications, and we do a 4x4 panel to start, and then we had the integrated mock-up, which maybe through the magic of computers we can get that picture to show up when you guys air this. But it was this crazy monster of a building that had a little bit of brick, a little bit, some windows, had a parapet condition, balcony condition, everything in this like 20 by 20 wall. So a lot of decisions actually were made in that phase. You don't want that to happen, but sometimes the owner sees it and goes, ooh, that darker one in the blend is just not working. So that's where you can air out the issues. Sometimes the sample panel you had is maybe too old or got faded, and so just seeing it up there helps. And you need to make sure that the masons are treating that brick the same way that they're going to treat it on the base building. So if it says, wait 2 weeks to wash it down, don't let them wash it down early just to get ahead of schedule, because it's going to change the mortar, it's going to change the color. They might try to use whatever soap they have lying around. They have to follow the specs to use the right cleaning. So I think being rigorous about that, and our contractor was really good about working with us to do that, helped a bunch before you're running the entire 300,000 bricks or whatever it is to building. 350,000, right, Denise? Yes.
Will you mind telling us, do you know the numbers on your project? No.
No idea. Denise?
Yeah, we'll get to it.
I definitely did.
Not that many, yeah. I mean, obviously, like that sounds like it's a lot. It's kind of like shocking.
Yeah, it's a fun fact.
It's a very fun
I'm going to
fact,
use it as much as I can.
I love fun facts. So we're talking a lot about aesthetics and kind of like these very kind of surface design choices, but I will have to remember who put this exhibition on, but it was at the Architecture Center in Chicago, right? And they looked at like a lot of buildings, and the sort of like late 1800s, early 1900s brick buildings were like way more sustainable in the sense of like operational costs, because they were like the heat retention, like insulation. Then, for example, like a Miesian sort of like steel tower, right? Like they even did thermal photography of all these buildings, right? And the older brick ones had been around for a long time, so obviously they're, the body carbon's cut down a bit, right? Because you're not making new buildings,
right?
But they're also like have like this heat retention, like they're built very much to like withstand some weather. So I guess it's just going to ask, are there any other considerations or like kind of downstream like benefits of using brick for sustainability? We talked about how it's not structural, but just like using it for a facade, like, are there any other benefits that you guys think about when you're doing these projects? It's, for sustainability or like even duration, right? Like what besides the kind of aesthetic facade appeal? You look so excited. Yeah. You look so excited. I think you should answer.
I mean, we're working on a renovation of a 200,000 square foot brick warehouse in Brooklyn right now at Bush Terminal. And it is mass masonry, and you can absolutely, you're right, you can feel the difference. Brick feels different than other materials. In terms of sustainability, I think that there's such a wide range of brick, right? So you have to really look at the firing process and
where it's coming
where it's coming from, where the clay is coming from, how it's being fired. If it isn't being fired and it's being air dried, what are the benefits or drawbacks to that? It's just so nuanced. I think that that's definitely something that if you're really interested in sustainability, you can get into that and really choose a very sustainable, path forward with brick. We haven't done a ground up mass masonry building, but I can absolutely see the benefits to it. Even at the warehouse that we're working on in Brooklyn right now, we have 2 foot thick walls that then taper up to the 5th story, and that was built in 1890, and just adjacent to it they actually added on. You can tell they added on in like the 1930s, so suddenly the brick was no longer structural. It's only 3 courses because it's 30 feet high and it's all structurally supported by steel. And you can feel the difference walking from one space to the other, and you can feel the heat sort of radiating it off of the brick in the main building, and it's just a very different feeling in the annex.
What do you mean when you see the heat radiating off, like from?
Well, because it's a thermal mass, so when the sun is hitting a facade for a certain amount of time, it actually it warms. It works to warm the space, and it works to cool the space, right? Like when it's cool at night, or I don't think it's always working to the benefit potentially, but
Not in this climate.
Sure.
on this climate, yeah.
Yeah, East Coast is tough. Yeah, I think for me, I have to separate the sustainability of like carbon footprint and that side, and then longevity and what people will like and what will stay and what won't be demolished in like 20 or 30 years. So I think brick definitely has that kind of longevity feeling, but in terms of carbon footprint, I am kind of curious about the future of brick. I mean, maybe I don't know if it is the most sustainable material sometimes, if it's fired twice and you're getting it all the way across the country. But I think it can be sustainable if you're getting it close by. I know in the case of the coated bricks, they're only fired once because the firing isn't affecting the color, the coating is affecting the color. I'm also interested in the future of thin brick. We're starting to use that sometimes just because there's a structural limitation, but maybe.
Can you just tell us what thin brick is real
Oh
quick?
yeah. So thin brick is essentially exactly what it sounds like. It's either been cut or fabricated as thin, half inch, 3/4 of an inch. I think there's various thicknesses, and there's different ways to attach it to your building. So it's sort of a mechanical backup fastening system, and there's various kind of levels of that. There's ones with a built-in air gap. There's ones with little pieces that stick out to actually kind of capture the brick. There's ones with rails that a grooved brick could slide into. So it's almost like a tile, but you can still get that great feeling if you detail it right, sort of that more timeless feeling, and you have a lot less material. As long as they're not cutting off the face, then you have a lot of waste. But if it's fabricated thin, I think there could be a future of that being a sustainable option and maybe a more cost-effective option. I still see the quality of that sometimes, vary depending on what system's used, but that might be.
Well, it's like a lot of other stuff, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
looking at the processes and like knowing where it's coming from and like kind of being more thoughtful. Like time is always going to make something, I think, a bit, like actually taking some time to look at it. And it sounds
Right.
like all y'all are really spending some time thinking about this material, right? I mean, I feel like not precluded to like one material, but maybe brick because of the way you layer it, like how kind of like intricate it is for you. Like it does make you kind of pause and stop and think about it a bit more, I think, right? Than maybe some other paneling or other facade material. We're running out of time a bit, so we're gonna go to questions, but I did want to start with just like from like kind of a career perspective, right? I think because, Morris Adjmi is like working so much with brick and like, these very known for it, I think, right? Like, I guess like in your career, like, did you kind of like move towards the brick, like is it something you thought about before, or did it kind of happen naturally? Because like I feel like a lot of architecture like schooling right now is not like thinking about it, right? So
Right.
I'm just I'm wondering kind of how that came. You don't have to give us the whole story of the firm, but like
In the
did you
beginning.
like, see yourself doing it in the beginning? Yeah.
No, not particularly. To be honest, I had designed some projects or worked, managed projects that were going to be brick, and for some reason they didn't get built or the project was sold. So before coming to Morris Adjmi Architects, but then once I came to MA, I was thrown on like 3 brick projects, and so it just kind of happened. And so I've never, really never seen one through construction before, and so I've like learned a lot, and it's, I'm a believer, full supporter of
Yeah,
brick.
anyone that hasn't seen the Mulberry Project, it's amazing.
It's really
It's a
great.
really, really beautiful building.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
What about you guys? Like from the moment you entered architecture school, be like, I'm going to be about brick. Like is that no? Okay. Oh, I mean, you know so much about it. I'm like kind of starstruck. I thought you just were kind of always had brick on the mind. No.
I mean, I think at our firm, we start every project with the big question: what is the massing and what is the material, right? And I think that brick is sort of always on the table, and somehow it's ended up being the material of choice at the end of the project for so many reasons. I mean, you can get any color, any finish. The modularity of it allows you to do such intricate detailing. I mean, you can do 1,000 buildings in brick and every single one of them will be unique. And I think that the flexibility of the material really lends itself well to, using it on a lot of different projects.
Honestly, Glen-Gery, brick is always on the table, and that's great. You should take that away.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start my architectural career thinking about only one material. And actually, I don't only use brick. Is that allowed? Am I allowed to say that?
I think you're allowed to say whatever you want. I think all three of you too, just to be clear, are not just using brick. Like, we understand that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we're definitely focusing on it, but we understand that you're not, and that's kind of like part of the interest, right? Because
Right.
it's like not. I mean, obviously, it's on the table and we're thinking about it, but I think a lot of people, when they think about modern buildings, are not immediately going to brick, right? And that's kind of like
But
I think we've been dancing around that fact, but yeah.
Right, and but it is one of the most used materials, I'd say, that I use, and our company uses a bunch. Just, for the reasons you guys said, versatility, timelessness, and cost is usually reasonable, and and durability. So it's cool to become an expert in it. I'm enjoying that. But that was not what I set out to do.
Of course, like I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek, but I just like kind of gesturing to the fact of it. We do have this kind of like historical view of it, so it's cool to see. So I think that's a good place to end. Honestly, I could listen to y'all talk about brick probably all night if I wanted to. I'm learning so much, but we have to move to questions, I think. So if anyone does have questions, we have some mics running around. I know that there's so many questions burning, so just don't be shy. Ask. You'll probably never be able to ask these three brilliant architects the questions again. So honestly, no? Oh yeah, we got one right here.
JP with Glen-Gery Brickworks. I'm a little biased to the company. So you spoke about sustainability and utilizing brick. So how important is sustainability to the projects that you guys are working on?
Great question.
How important? The importance.
Think how important is it?
When you're designing a building, how important is it?
I mean, it probably definitely depends on the project and the client too, right?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the priorities for the client. But I think as a firm, it's definitely a priority for us.
And it should be for everyone.
I mean, I think at this point, it probably is a priority for everyone, right?
Yeah.
If not, then you've missed what's happening in the world around us. But I don't know, we approach it in very different ways depending on the project. We just recently finished the Jones Beach Energy and Nature Center, which is net zero. So, in that case, that was the priority. That was the focus of the project. So every decision had something to do with the environment. It was about telling the story of Jones Beach. It was about creating something that would be there for a long time, would weather well and last, and of course be net zero. So creating as much energy as it is using. So I think that, on every project, it's definitely important. And from a brick perspective, one of the things that we have recently looked into, we've only looked into it for an interior application, but we started to look into the hempcrete block, which basically is just lime and hemp, which is a fast-growing material. And structurally, it's as good as CMU and other masonry. It goes up very quickly. You could do I think the block that we were looking at, it actually has a sort of biomaterial that's structural, that's set into the brick. And so, you can stack these up to 30 feet and they're, sort of self-structural. So I think that there are probably a lot of materials like that are coming down the pipeline and thinking about how to make brick more sustainable material to use more widely.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your question too. It's great. Does anyone else have any questions for the panelists before we wrap up here? Okay, well, let's have a round of applause, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Glen-Gery, for having us.